Let's make some hoppers, Sri Lankan style. First, I'll talk about the equipment. I use nonstick hopper pans. I know nonstick is not supposed to be really good, but as long as you discard the pan whenever the nonstick coating is starting to wear, it should be fine. I use at least two to make the whole process go faster when you're making hoppers. And if you don't have a gas stove, a good workaround is a biscuit tin ring like this one. So basically, you take the bottom of a round biscuit tin, you cut out the bottom, and it just makes a ring. You could also do this with a ring of aluminum foil, and if it fits around your pan, that will direct the heat around the edges and make crispy edges for you. Full recipe is in the comments. So this is a yeast mixture, 2 cups of warm water. I'm using either Fleischmann's or Red Star yeast, a quarter teaspoon, and sprinkle that on top. And 3 teaspoons of sugar to start with. This is going to activate the yeast. And then I stir everything really well so that the sugar dissolves. You could also use white sugar. I'm just using brown here. And then the yeast also dissolves. And then you cover it, leave it to become foamy for about 10 to 15 minutes. Let's get the flour ready. So I'm using Bob's Red Mill brown rice flour, the stone ground variety. I think this packet is over, so I'm just getting like a half a cup out of this packet and opening a brand new one. So basically 3 cups, full cups of brown rice flour, and I use a half a cup of gluten-free flour. You could use half a cup of regular flour if you don't mind gluten. So you would mix the two flours together, and then you get your foamy yeast mixture. Notice that those little foamy things on top, that yeast has activated and is ready to be poured in and made into batter. Mix really well. Sometimes I use a whisk for this. I'm adding the remaining cup of water, half a cup at a time. Um, and you may need a few more tablespoons also, just to get it into a nice pourable, thick pancake batter-like consistency. So there's the extra half cup going in there. And you don't want any lumps. So if you do see lumps in your batter, you can squash them against the side of the bowl to sort of get rid of them. When the batter is pretty smooth, you can cover it with a damp paper towel and put it in a slightly warmed oven to about 200 Celsius and then turned off. Or if you have a proof setting in your oven, proofing, that works too. Now it's ready to take out, and when we take the paper towel off, you can see that it's actually risen to the top and then sort of collapsed down. That's what you're going for. And then it's ready to add coconut milk. Make sure your milk the can has been warmed up. It's nice and liquid coconut milk. It's not frozen and chunky. That's going to make it very hard to mix smoothly. So I've been warming it up in a container of warm water, so it's nice and liquid and keeps the yeast nice and warm. You don't want to be putting in cold coconut milk. So then you'll just mix the whole thing up into a nice pourable hopper batter. You're going for a nice liquid pourable consistency, and you would also add the remaining sugar and also salt. When you make hoppers, you may need to taste and adjust salt. Let's move on to a little paper towel oil spreader. So tear a paper towel in two, and then half of it you tear into little bits and use it as filler in the paper towel. And you can use this to spread coconut oil. I'm using a twisty tie from a vegetable bunch here. I'm just reusing it to hold the whole thing together and form a little handle to hold that. The oil spreader is really convenient. So you could always add your coconut oil into a little dish with the oil spreader, and it's ready for you and keeps your hands clean when you need to spread. And it spreads just a tiny amount of oil onto the pan when you're cooking. So let's get cooking. This is a hopper that is already done. How you tell whether the pan is hot enough is you hold your hand over the pan. It can't be too hot or cold. And you'll figure this out for your stove once you cook one or two hoppers. Make sure you grease the pan between each hopper. Make sure so they'll never stick to the pan and they'll come out once they're done. Pour the batter into the side of the pan or the middle and swirl it around exactly once, slowly. If you keep swirling over and over, then the edges get too thick and you're going for a very crispy, lacy edge. So just the one swirl all around. Let it cook undisturbed a couple minutes until it's done. I don't seem to have recorded taking out that particular hopper, but here's another one sort of halfway cooking. Um, And so that's not done yet because it's not browned enough, at least for my taste, around the edges. So I just close the lid again. So you can check on them like that, but for the most part, keep the lids closed. I'm just going to move them onto a bigger plate since we're going to have more and more hoppers and it's just going to look better. Let's break off an edge just to show you how crispy and delicate they are. And then let's check in on the other hopper. Maybe it's done. Not quite, but the first one maybe is done now. Yeah, so let's take that one out. I'm using a silicone spatula. You could also use a wooden spatula. So I'm actually gonna do a demonstration of what happens when the pan's too hot. So what happens is as you put the batter in, it's going to sizzle really loudly. And then when you swirl it, it's going to have those giant holes like that and start sort of immediately cooking on the pan without spreading nicely and evenly. So that pan was a little too hot. It's still edible. It's just going to be a pretty thick hopper. So this one looks really nice and is ready to be taken out now. If you notice, my hoppers don't have a lot of puffy middles. I just like crispy edges and not so puffy middles, but if you just leave more hopper mixture in the middle, you will get a nice puffy middle if that's your favorite part of the hopper. So let's look at the opposite of too hot. When the pan is too cold, what happens? So this pan I have heated, but just not enough. And so I'm going to pour in the batter and we'll see what happens. And we do the usual swirl in, but what happens, it just pours back down into the middle. It doesn't stick on the sides. There's no nice holes and crispy edges. Let's move on to some variations. So one of the things I like is the pani appa, but it's a mess to make with honey in the batter and all of that. So instead, what I do is I either use grated jaggery or coconut sugar just sprinkled on top of the hopper batter. And some of it just melts into the batter as it cooks, and it's really nice. And it achieves the sort of same pani hopper effect. And then you can also take a fully cooked hopper and add some grated cheese, and then keep it closed for a little bit to just melt the cheese. I use cheddar cheese here, and here's the cheese hopper nicely with the melted cheese. And let's check in on the Hakuru hopper, which should be finally done. And there it is. Next, I'm gonna show an egg hopper. So you wanna grease the pan and then add just enough batter to coat the pan because you're going to try to cook the egg. And after the hopper goes in, the heat has to be turned low. I know some people like to sort of break up their yolk, some people like to put salt and pepper on it. I personally like a runny egg yolk left whole, so that's kind of what I'm going for. And then you crack an egg right in the middle. And because I'm going for the runny yolk, I take my eggs straight out of the fridge. And you cover it, and it does take a while. So, because you've lowered the heat as well, in the meantime, you could potentially make a whole other hopper. So, because the egg hopper takes a while. And you want it to sort of cook slowly because otherwise the edges get really brown and burnt, and the egg in the middle will be raw. So, rather, you want the edges just brown and the egg just cooked. So, we're checking in on the hopper, not yet done. I'm just going to turn it around and leave it for some more time. And some time has passed, and we think that this is finally done. So let's open it up and take it out. And there it is, a jiggly egg yolk, but the white is mostly firm and well cooked. I'm just going to eat this with some simple lunumiris. And first, I'm just going to demonstrate how very sort of delicate and crispy the edges are. You can literally break it apart and crumble it. Um, so let's dig in, take a piece, and break into the runny yolk. Mm. And let's try it with some lunumiris. Delicious. I hope you try this at home.